Good afternoon, and welcome to this year's RMTLI Lecture Series. We would like to acknowledge our partners for today's event. This event is supported by SGV and Company and Animation Council of the Philippines Incorporated. Special thanks to Pioneer Life Incorporated. We would also like to acknowledge our co-conveners, ASEAN Youth Advocates Network, Asia Society Philippines, Center for Filipino Youth Volunteers, SINAG, Far Eastern University International Studies Society, GoodGov PH, FINMA Education, Student Council Alliance of the Philippines, University of the Philippines, Diliman Information Office, UP Asian Center, and Zwelig Family Foundation. We would love to see you share your time with us here during the lectures. Please tag us on social media at Magsaysay Award with hashtag Ramon Magsaysay Award and hashtag RMTLI Lecture Series. Our program will begin in a few minutes. Welcome to the Ramon Magsaysay Center, Manila. For an orderly conduct of the program, the audience is reminded of the following house rules. Please observe silence during the program. Be respectful to the speakers and fellow participants. During the open forum, you may approach the microphone or write your question on the pieces of paper provided and give it to an usher. In case of a medical emergency, please approach any of the ushers. If there is a need to evacuate the venue, please stay calm. The ushers will facilitate an orderly evacuation if needed. All doors of the hall will be opened. The exit doors are on the left side of the hall. Those who are on the stage and those from rows 1 to 10 will use the door near the stage, while those from row 11 onwards will use the door near the back of the hall.
Before we begin today's program, we would like to remind the audience of the following. The video and audio functions of our audience will be disabled during the lecture. For questions, clarifications, and/or comments, we encourage everyone to use the Q&A tab and the chat room in the Zoom webinar or the comment section in Facebook or YouTube. We will try to address as many relevant questions and comments during the session. Please be respectful in the chat room, Q&A tab, and comment section. Please follow the Ramon Magsaysay Award on our social media accounts in Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, X, and YouTube. For more information on the Ramon Magsaysay Award and this year's laureates, please visit our website at www.rmaward.asia. Thank you for joining us today. We will begin the program in a few minutes.
To officially open this year's lecture series and today's event, we would like to call on the Vice Chairman of the Board of Trustees of the Ramon Magsaysay Award Foundation, Ms. Suzanne Siskel.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 66th Ramon Magsaysay Transformational Leadership Institute Lecture Series. Over the last 2 days, we've gathered to recognize the 2024 Ramon Magsaysay awardees and their incredible work for positive change. Before we formally begin, I would like to acknowledge the presence of the following people. His Excellency, the Ambassador of Indonesia, Agus Wijoyo, who's based here in Manila. Edgardo Castro. Makasih, Pak. Edgardo Castro, President of Global Peace Foundation Philippines. Stephen Muncie, Ramon Magsaysay Awardee and Executive Director of Community and Family Services International. And joining us through Zoom, I know there are many, many people, but among them are His Excellency Ambassador Lai Tai Bing of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam in the Philippines, His Excellency Ambassador Imtiaz Ahmad Kazi of Pakistan to the Philippines, Shirley O. Nuevo, First Secretary and Consul of the Philippine Embassy in Hanoi, Victoria Maravilla Segovia, President of Green Convergence for Safe Food, Healthy Environment, and Sustainable Economy, Jonathan Batangan, Executive Director of Cebuana Lulier Foundation, Maria Teresa M. Oliva, Executive Director of Green Convergence for Safe Food, Healthy Environment, and Sustainable Economy, Kazi Nazrin Siddiqa, Executive Director of Education and Cultural Society, Alair Grubbs, Mission Director of USAID in Vietnam, Rebecca Tanada, Executive Director of GZ0 Institute, Marina Regina Agustin, Chair of the Department of Asian Studies of the University of Santo Tomas. Also in the hall, Brother Mike Magsaysay Valenzuela of De La Salle University. Brother Mike, welcome. And our awardee, Dr. Karma Funcho, who some of you met this morning, and our trustee, Emily Abrera, who some of you also met this morning. For more than 6 decades, the Ramon Magsaysay Award Foundation has honored individuals and organizations across Asia who embody selfless service, integrity, and transformative leadership, or what we call greatness of spirit. Named after Ramon Magsaysay, the 7th president of the Philippines, the award celebrates those who inspire others to make a difference. This year, we're recognizing 5 outstanding awardees. Nguyen Thi Ngoc Phung from Vietnam, Karma Funcho from Bhutan, Miyazaki Hayao from Japan, the Rural Doctors Movement from Thailand, and for emergent leadership, Farwiza Farhan from Indonesia. As part of RMAF's mission to nurture future leaders, the Ramon Magsaysay Transformative Leadership Institute empowers aspiring change makers by equipping them with the skills, knowledge, and values needed to drive sustainable development through innovative programs and initiatives. We are honored to close this year's lecture series with Farwiza Farhan. And there should be a video coming up.
For the last 30 years, the world has strongly embraced a phrase that has permeated society: women empowerment. In the Indonesian archipelago, one woman has embraced the concept of women empowerment and has used this to fuel her fight in environmental protection. 2024 Ramon Magsaysay Awardee for Emergent Leadership, Farwiza Farhan. As founder of Hutan Alam dan Lingkungan Aceh, otherwise known as HAKA, Farhan is a leading figure in strengthening the protection, conservation, and restoration of the Lucer ecosystem, an Indonesian biodiversity hotspot and one of Asia's largest carbon sinks. Through innovative grassroots programs on forest monitoring, policy advocacy and community, and women empowerment, HAKA has become one of the world's guardians on climate change mitigation and adaptation and biodiversity protection, ensuring the long-term prosperity of communities not only in Aceh, but the region at large. The driving force behind this inspiring transformation is Farwiza Farhan, a woman. Imagine the limitless possibilities for the millions of girls and women in Asia and beyond who will be inspired and empowered by Farhan's youthful energy and zeal, her sense of adventure, her transformative leadership, and her greatness of spirit.
Farwiza's leadership journey protecting the Lucer ecosystem by engaging with communities and local and national governments is an inspiration to all, especially young women. As our engagement with the awardees the past 2 days comes to a close, let us reflect on all their stories and all those parts that really resonate with each of us, including what we are about to hear from Farwiza. So without further ado, let us now welcome on stage 2024 Ramon Magsaysay Awardee and Emergent Leader from Indonesia, Farwiza Farhan.
I feel like I just need to take a few seconds to compose myself. Growing up female in a conservative society influenced everything I did and choices that I made in life. I don't have the clicker. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Growing up, I like doing boys' things. Climbing onto things, trees, structures, whatever I can find. Riding my bicycle through the neighborhood. I didn't know that these things were designated for boys because my parents never differentiated our responsibilities based on gender. In our house, everyone was expected to achieve the highest education possible while taking part in household responsibilities. That include my father. But things were different outside our home. At school, and then at university, and eventually at work, I learned what it meant to be a girl, then a woman. Society sees you through the lens of how you look more than what you can do. They judge you based on what you wear, not so much on what you know. Schools and society taught me to be insecure about myself, about my dreams, about my ideas and my ambitions. Towards the last year of high school, I fell in love for the first time. Not with a person, but with an ecosystem. I met colorful coral reef on the beach of Iboy in the West Islands in Aceh, just off the coast of my hometown in Banda Aceh. Seeing these colorful creatures thriving underwater instilled a sense of wonder in me, a curiosity, a desire, a purpose. Whatever it takes, I wanted to do this for the rest of my life. I wanted a future where I get to go diving for a living. So off I went. I studied marine biology and I graduated 4 years later. Then I returned to the very same place where I fell in love with the ocean for the first time. It was devastating. I was heartbroken. The reef has been destroyed. A combination of El Nino, increasing sea temperature, and overfishing have wiped out our life on the reef, leaving barren rubble and clusters of black sea urchin. I felt powerless. I felt that I can't win. Being young and inexperienced, I did not know what to do. At that time, I thought conserving and protecting forests may be easier. Maybe we just need to put a fence around a block of forest and it will be protected. How naive and wrong I was. I must admit, when I started working in conservation, I brought with me the common colonial mindset that conservation areas are places designated for wildlife and plants, and it has to be kept pristine and untouched. People must be kept out. My journey in conservation started when I got hired as a spokesperson who are not allowed to speak in the Loiser ecosystem. It was a landscape so rich with biodiversity and also known as the last place on earth where the critically endangered Sumatran rhino, tiger, elephant, and orangutan still roam together in the wild. Less than a month into the job, I got sent to attend a government meeting to argue against a permit of a pulp and paper company that would have destroyed vast tracts of forests. I came prepared with maps and legal arguments against the concession. But the response I get from the company director was, "I worry about your hair. Why aren't you wearing a proper headscarf?" Unfortunately, that was not an isolated incident. When I was testifying against an oil palm company who was about to engage in illegal activities, the police were more interested in asking me about my headscarf than what I know about the company illegal activities. Those questions were intended to undermine and intimidate. I know these struggles are rather universal to women in many parts of the world. Our bodies are the site of governmentalities, where everyone feels like they can have a say on what we can do with our bodies. But on top of that, I also know that conservation should not be an exclusive club felt by biologists and ecologists. All of us depend on healthy environment and ecosystem services provided by nature. Why not all of us take responsibility to protect and restore our Mother Earth? Women play an essential role in conservation. We know that women act as stewards of the environment. Forest patch managed by women have 51% less deforestation compared to the area managed by men. Over 80% of the world remaining biodiversity also exists within the area managed by indigenous communities, men and women who have protected them for generations. So why are decision-making over these areas are dominated by any other groups other than these people? Women make up half of the global population, yet only a fraction sit at the decision-making tables. We are the most negatively impacted by climate change and natural disasters. Why does our perspective seem to matter less? So here we are on a crusade to change this reality. I am stubborn, and in the face of difficulties, I choose to double down. In 2017, we ran our first paralegal training for women. This training was attended by about 15 women. They are mothers and grandmothers and housewives too. And over the years, they grow to become our first woman-led ranger team. Through the lens of this woman, we learn how we can be better forest protector. Their gentle yet persuasive approach every time they come across illegal loggers and people encroaching into their forests prove to dismantle the aggression and open pathway for dialogue. Many of the illegal loggers would then be convinced to take part in forest restoration initiatives. In addition to protecting forests, these women also began to play bigger roles in the village. They used to sit at the back making coffee for the meetings, but now they are in the meetings, arguing for budgets, arguing for activities that would enhance development in their village. Soon, they become famous. They're on the cover of magazines and they receive multiple awards for their work in forest protection. Yet, despite this much celebrated success, new problems also emerge. We learn that fame could backfire. Our rose-tinted perspective when conflict emerged began to shatter. Men and women in the patrol team begin to have more conflict as outside funding begin to flow more freely into the village. We realize that when we strengthen and empower women in the village, we also need to work with the men to build the support system for these women so they could continue to thrive. We need feminist men. We need to build a strong village-level institution with a governance system based on transparency and accountability. So we didn't put all the burden to minimize corruption, resolve conflict, and build organizational capacity on the leaders alone. We need feminist men as well as strong and empowered women. Throughout my years of obtaining environmental education, I was under the impression that the primary perpetrator of environmental destruction is communities living near forests. They were labeled as illegal loggers, poachers, and squatters in protected areas. Yet, throughout the years of actually working in conservation, I learned that the issue is much more complex and sinister than that. In 2011, when I barely began working in the Loiser ecosystem, I visited the Tripa pit swamp, one of the most important pit swamp in the Loiser ecosystem. It is also known as the Sumatran orangutan capital of the world. I went there because a palm oil company was clearing land without permit in the area, and we were building a case against them. When I get there, I met Suratman. He was a farmer. He told me that he used to grow corn, chilies, and oil palm. And he told me how the company took his land, bulldozed everything, but kept the oil palm that he planted standing. He was so angry at that time, he mustered enough courage to go to the police to file a report, and the police responded with a question: how much time do you want to spend in jail? How come you dare to fight against this company? Not long after that conversation with Suratman, I get to personally witness the level of corruption in the system. We filed a criminal case against this company for illegally clearing land without permit. The police then responded to our complaint by recommending the government to issue the permit for this company, whitewashing their illegal behavior. So we escalate. We took the company permit to court, along with it, the governor, who issued the permit. And while we were arguing in court, the company decided to do this: burn the land that they have recently cleared, an act that is clearly illegal. We were so angry, but we would not let a good disaster go to waste. We got everybody to be as angry with us. Hundreds and thousands of people sent letters and petitions to the government. Indonesian government get embarrassed. How come a small company on the edge of the Loiser ecosystem dare put our name to shame? The government decided to file a lawsuit against this company. Long story short, the court decided that the company, not just the person with a match, is liable for causing forest fires and environmental destruction. And the court sentenced the company with a fine and restoration costs of about $26 million. It took another decade of persistent campaigning and many more lawsuits later before the company eventually gave in and paid the fine they are due to the government. Experience taught us that the strongest advocate for this ecosystem is the people whose life and livelihood is closely tied to this landscape. When in 2013, the Aceh government issued a special plan that dismantled the protection of the Loiser ecosystem, the community of Aceh Tamiang began protesting. They have survived a tsunami from the mountain, a flash flood that was so severe, no one left unaffected. They have engaged in extensive forest restoration efforts, and to see the area that they have restored lose its protection is just too unbearable. They sent multiple protest letters, and we joined forces with them to bring the same degree of awareness to communities across the Loiser ecosystem. And this culminates into a citizen lawsuit. We sue the Aceh government and the Indonesian government for putting people's life at risk by issuing a spatial plan that destroys hundreds and thousands of hectares of forest, potentially catalyzing another unnatural disasters like drought, floods, and landslides. We argued the case for over a year, and in the end, we lost. We lost in court. But the communities that took part in this lawsuit get the first-hand experience that it's possible to protest, to organize, and even sue the government for the protection of your land and your livelihood. They decided to bring home the fight. They organized their communities and they seek to reform the spatial plan from the grassroots. One of the plaintiffs, Abu Kari Amanjarum, the man in the middle, decided to build a movement against gold mine that threatened his village. He and the communities of Pining would never allow mining to take place in their area until the end of time. But this kind of victories is not common. Many more activists in Indonesia, especially those rooted in communities, marginalized and far from the attention span of the world media, is being criminalized, prosecuted, punished, or even killed for a crime as small as staging a protest against a mining company, cement factory, palm oil company, pulp and paper companies, logging operation, dam development, or any other project of national importance. The experience in Tripa, then through citizen lawsuits, made us realize that by default, legally, communities do have a seat at the decision-making table, but that seat is often underutilized because the barrier of entry is too high. Take, for example, the fact that every large-scale exploitation project and development project requires an environmental permit, and that environmental permit acquired through passing an environmental impact assessment. By default, impacted community have a seat at the decision-making table. But oftentimes they get invited to the meeting and they're not able to understand what's going on. They get invited into the meeting without having a grapple on the reality of the consequences if they allow that development to happen. As a consequences, unknowingly a whole lot of communities give out a blank check of consent for the project to go ahead. So we want to change this reality, and we begin by working with the communities across the Loiser ecosystem to provide them with environmental impact assessment training, with the hope that the training will give them information about their rights and at the very least, provide them with a clear pathways on what to do should a development project landed on their village. These trainings activated the power of grassroots communities, allowing them to build peer network with other communities and develop strategies on how to face the threat of destructive projects, empowering them to rise up and mount resistance against the threat. We have witnessed the community in Betong, in Linga, in Mangamat rise against the threat of gold mining. The communities in Tenggulun, in Serbajadi, in Tripa develop resistance against expansion of palm oil. And groups of women forest defenders throughout Loiser build a network of peer learning and support for each other. These victories are important, but it's not enough. As our works with communities deepen, it becomes obvious that we want to make conservation work. We need local communities to be the conservation champion. We seek to shift the systems and make conservation and economic growth better aligned. We dream big, but we start small. We invest time and energy to develop forest protection and economic development at the village level. And we learn to trust the sovereignty of youth and women, as well as the communities on the grassroots. We sit in dialogue and we listen. We're really looking to find common ground. The impact of this intervention is never immediate, and oftentimes difficult to measure in metrics and numbers. Sometimes a celebrated success today is a new challenge tomorrow. Acknowledging this reality, all we can do is continue learning and develop iteration for our approach. My dream is that one day, the community and local politicians will choose the path of conservation as part of their integrated economic development because it makes sense. Now, I've been telling you a lot about what we did and what we dream for the future. But let me show you what we are facing right now. Yeah.
Saya menikmati pekerjaan ini. Tapi justru di situ kutukannya. Di saat-saat yang seharusnya santai seperti ini, malah ngomongin masalah.
Siang itu, kami melihat alat berat masuk ke dalam suaka marga satwa rawa singgir. Usai dibakar, tanaman industri seperti sawit mulai muncul.
Kalau kereta 1 bulan sekali ganti oli, ganti gigi tarik, rem, aduh.
Rasa tidak terhormat yang kami haturkan kepada BGSDA hari ini yang telah lalai dalam hal perlindungan suaka marga satwa rawa singgir.
Luas Taman Nasional ini mencapai 83.000 hektar, tapi 40.000 hektar sudah jadi perkebunan sawit.
Hutan erat kaitannya dengan manusia. Hutan menyediakan banyak jasa untuk manusia.
Karena tanpa hutan, tanpa air, tanpa sungai, kami orang Papua tidak bisa hidup.
Perusahaan apapun kami tidak terima lagi.
I know I take risk by showing you that trailer. This film will launch on Sunday, 17th of November 2024. This is a collaboration between us, Awardee Nusantara, Forest Watch Indonesia, Greenpeace Indonesia, Pusaka Bentala Rakyat, and 2021 Ramon Magsaysay Awardee Dandi Laksono. Please stay tuned to the upcoming launch. So as I close this lecture, I want to open an invitation for all of us to dream big together, but also to take the first crucial steps to make this vision a reality. Join us in making the choice for conservation, for community empowerment, and a sustainable future. Together, we can create a lasting change. Thank you.
Thank you, Farwiza, for such an insightful lecture and incredible slides and film. To carry on with our program, we shall now welcome our esteemed panel to give their reactions and insights on Farwiza's lecture, starting with our moderator for today. Mr. Ramon Del Rosario Jr. is Chairman and CEO of FINMA Corporation, with investments in education, construction materials, property development, and hotels. He leads the FINMA Education Network, which includes 9 institutions, as well as FINMA Microtel Hotels, FINMA Hospitality, and United Public Paper Company. He is Vice Chairman of FINMA Property Holdings and serves as Director for Union, Galva Steel Corporation, Phil Cement Corp., and FINMA Solar Energy. He also leads Philippine business for education and serves on advisory boards for various organizations. Previously, he chaired the National Museum of the Philippines from 2010 to 2017, and he now serves as one of the trustees of the Ramon Magsaysay Award Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm round of applause to Ramon R. Del Rosario, Jr.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Suzanne. First of all, let me congratulate Farwiza for a very well-deserved award and for a very powerful, eloquent, and inspiring presentation this afternoon. Thank you. I will deviate from the program a little bit to accommodate some of the requirements of our panel. What I would like to do at this point is call on one of our eminent panelists to deliver her reaction first. And then after this, I will call the other two panelists to join us on stage. And we will begin what I hope will be a conversation of those present here. Riwana Hassan was presented with the Ramon Magsaysay Award in 2012 for her uncompromising courage and impassioned leadership in a campaign of judicial activism in Bangladesh that affirms the people's right to a good environment as nothing less than the right to dignity and life. She has received many other accolades, including the 16th Annual International Women of Courage Award by the U.S. Department of State and the Green Legal Award from the Balipara Foundation in 2022. In August this year, Rizwana Hassan was sworn in as an advisor to the interim government of Bangladesh, particularly to the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and the Ministry of Water Resources. She is also the chief executive of the Bangladesh Environmental Lawyers Association, which has also received numerous accolades. Let us welcome, joining us from Bangladesh, the Honorable Advisor Syeda Rizwana Hassan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First, congratulations to Farwiza, Farhan, and all other awardees. What a tremendous achievement. Farwiza, listening to you, I just went back to the memories of July and August of 2024 here in Bangladesh, where the youth of Bangladesh, of fighting against a fascist regime and managed to oust the regime with bravery that cannot be described. You, in your youth, started a process that also required huge bravery and confidence and commitment. So I'm increasingly becoming a believer of the power of youth in changing the environmental status of the globe. And I see that in climate change negotiations taking place in Baku and in our fight for climate change, many admirable youth leaders are gradually taking the steering seat, which I believe is a very good news for them. Reflecting on your presentation, Farwiza, I think it's the old debate of whether we go egocentric and anthropocentric, or anthropocentric, when you talk about question of environment. But I think even if you take an egocentric approach, the very fact that people dependent on the natural resources can be the best custodian, and not the government, and not the companies, has again been reiterated. When we say ecocentric, it does not have to be devoid of people. You can always rely on the communities who are very much dependent on that resource base and if you give ownership to them, they are actually the best owners, and as they can be much more responsible in most cases than the states and the corporate powers. I think your presentation has been a great illustration because at the moment I'm dealing with the human-animal conflict. Elephants entering Bangladesh, how to deal with it? They're entering from neighboring countries, not knowing to deal with them, are actually getting very cruel against them. So we are trying to train the communities, and we are calling them elephant response team. And then we are actually taking up people from the community. We are training them, we are teaching them as to why they can be, kind to the elephants, and that coexistence is possible. And I must tell you that we are actually getting very successful in our research. Wherever we found that communities are involved and empowered, the burden of government also lessens a lot. Another good news that I will share with you, because I'm actually someone who has been working with the communities for the 30 years of my life, and it's not my advisor role that has got me the Ramon Magsaysay award. It is rather my role with the communities that has got me all the awards that have been named. The previous government wanted to lease out 700 acres of very rich forest for construction of a training center for the bureaucracy. So when I was on the side of the table, I tried to fight back legally with success. But now that I'm in this role, and I know how the communities feel about their forests, and I know why a training center does not have to be a forest and other lands are available. And when I know why these forests are important for protecting people from natural disasters and how important they are for biodiversity, the first thing I did was I got the lease cancelled and got the forest back to the forest department with an instruction that this patch of very rich forest will have to be managed with community participation. You see, when we talk about community empowerment, it's not always that easy. It's not always that straightforward, because there are corporate interests that are supported by the government. So when you empower the communities, when I empower the community, the companies with the backup support from the government, they create a split among the community. So you get a vested interest group sometimes in the communities as well. And it gets very difficult unless you're really prepared with your messages to get the majority of the people on your side. A very good example of community participation in natural resource management is perhaps the community forestry model of Nepal, which I hear that many reputed universities are now teaching as a subject. And it was being said that 90% of the forest of Nepal will disappear by 1990 if that rate of deforestation was not arrested. But with community empowerment and real community empowerment, Nepal has got back 90% of its forest. And people there are managing the forest, living in the forest in a way that's compatible with the forest and wildlife. And they're utilizing the forest, non-forest resources, and also sometimes the forest resources. And with that, they're earning so much money, keeping the forest intact. They're now assisting the government for constructing highway by the side of their villages. Isn't that amazing? So end of the day, when the common people are the owners of the natural resources, why denying the common people? Why putting the corporate interest above everything? And why the states would be supporting the companies and not the communities, when the fact remains that you can actually have 100 industries set up anywhere in the country, but you cannot create or recreate one forest one river, one natural stream. So whatever development we plan, we have to put nature at the center, and we have to rely communities for protecting the nature. And it can't be development at the sector, and we can't be trying to rearrange nature as per development narratives that are being offered. So with these words, wishing you all the best, Farwiza, and all other awardees in your future endeavors. Thank you very much for inviting me here, Ramon Magsaysay Foundation. I wish I could be there in person sometime soon, maybe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Advisor Rizwana Hassan. Very valuable inputs. Before we proceed, I would like to call on our panelists who are here with us to join us on stage so that we can, as I said earlier, hopefully have a conversation. Let me first introduce Mr. Silvestre Barameda Jr., or Sly. I don't know if the Sly refers to his character. Executive Director of the National Resilience Council of the Philippines, a science and technology-based public-private partnership organization that supports resilience by bridging the role of private businesses, non-government organizations, government, and the academe for resilient and inclusive communities in the Philippines. Furthermore, he serves as a board member of the Private Sector Alliance for Disaster Resilient Societies, or ARISE, Philippines, and a member of the People's Survival Fund Board, which oversees policies and strategies on financing local climate adaptation projects in the country. Let us welcome Mr. Sly Barameda up on stage, please. Our other panelist is Ann Dumaliang, the co-founder and managing trustee of the Masungi Georeserve Foundation, a pioneering conservation project in the Philippines focused on restoring and protecting a 60-million-year-old limestone karst landscape and its surrounding forests. Anne also serves on the advisory council of IT.org, the Center for Climate and Nature of the World Economic Forum, and is recognized as a Time Magazine Next Generation Leader for 2024. Let us welcome on stage Ann Dumaliang. Thank you, thank you. Thank you both for joining us. Let me start the conversation by picking up on something that our previous speaker mentioned, and also you spoke about towards the end of your presentation. And this is the tension and the desire to forge a balance between conservation and economic development. And I guess to highlight the tension, your conservation work, of course, trains communities to be passionate in their preservation of the earth. They are trained to organize themselves, to understand what it takes to save the earth and the communities, etc. And in the process of doing that, you achieve a lot of success. You do keep out irresponsible development, etc. But I guess the other side of it is that you do have communities who live in these reserves. And these communities, by and large, are people who are poor and looking for economic opportunities to improve their lives. And I guess the tension clearly is a desire to have opportunities for economic development in the areas where they are, while at the same time working to preserve the environment so that it is there for generations to come and for all of humanity to benefit from. But that is a natural tension. And I would like to hear first Rizwana and then maybe the other members of our panel to talk about that a little bit more, because I don't think we have covered it sufficiently. And of course, please feel free also to make the other comments that you were prepared to make. But let me start with Rizwana to talk a little bit more about this particular tension that I think is very important to discuss. Thank you.
I'm not sure it's if Ms. Rizwana is still connected with us through Zoom.
I don't know. She said she would try to stay. She will chime in if she's able, but we are not sure because her commitments make it very difficult for her to stay the whole time.
Okay, I think if it's come down to our experience in the Loiser ecosystem in Aceh province, the tension between poverty reduction and conservation become quite obvious. Aceh as a province, it sits across the mountains on the northernmost corner of Sumatra. This is the kind of land that is so sensitive that a little bit more destruction to the forest means floods and landslides downstream. At the same time, this is also an area that is so rich with natural resources. Oil and gas in Aceh have fueled Indonesia for many decades. Aceh is also listed as one of the poorest provinces in Sumatra, and this poverty is directly linked to the number of natural disasters that the province are experiencing. You can't continue to be prosperous when you grow crops one day and the next day it got taken away by floods. You can't be prosperous if everything that you have invested gets swept away in natural disasters. Every time natural disaster happen, people go back to zero, if not minus, because they get encapsulated in debt. So much of climate migration and climate disasters comes down to diminishing economic opportunity due to changes in climate. So this reality put us in perspective that in order for us to properly develop and build wealth and be prosperous, we need to protect our environment. Now, the economic choices that we need to make should not be the one that is destructive. 2 days ago, I got to visit Masungi and spoke in depth with Anne about the threat that they are facing, but also how sustainable it is to run an operation like Masungi Geo Reserve. That is an example where economic opportunity and conservation could totally go hand in hand. So with that, I'm gonna hand it to you, Anne, to add into this conversation.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Anne, please.
No, well, just to support what Wiza was saying, we definitely need to protect our life-giving ecosystems. And there is this notion that, protecting the environment hurts communities, but actually if you go downstream to the communities immediately next to these very sensitive sites, they want to protect it because they're the ones experiencing the destruction firsthand. We're protecting the upper reaches of the Upper Marikina watershed that supports 20 million Filipinos downstream all the way in Metro Manila. There's interest among mayors, young people. We know the effects of flooding, the destruction that causes. There's also interest in the communities, and they were first to be interested before everyone downstream started making noise about it. What we have seen in Masungi, though, is that there's also a deliberate attempt to try to cause a divide, to make it seem like communities do not want it when they actually do, right? So for example, in our protected areas, it's actually required that you have an inventory of forest-dependent communities given within 6 or 2 years' time of an area being legislated. That should give you an idea which groups are truly forest-dependent, which are indigenous people who deserve to be in that land, and which ones are there fraudulently. And yet that information is rarely out. And that causes a huge misunderstanding, huge gray area on who should be there and who should not be there, right? And that causes that big confusion. Added to that, that's why it helps that there are checks and balances, people who are actually on the ground at the front lines. Because when we're talking about remote areas, there's very little who could see what's going on in these places right? But when you empower communities, have genuine conservation initiatives like Masungi, have forest rangers working and patrolling these parts, then we have a chance at finding these kinds of interests who do tend to inseminate and go very deep into communities as well. And that is something that we definitely need more of. Now, when we talk about the tourism side of things, there are ways to provide economic support so that conservation prospers and livelihood opportunities are available for people. And it has been proven time and time again, not just in Masungi, but in many, many other kinds of activities and industries internationally. We just need to make that choice and make it at the time that we need to make it.
Yeah, thank you very much. My take here is practically balancing conservation and the economic benefits. Is practically also a balance of, in terms of the push and pull of influence and interests. Meaning, we need to be able to map out interests which resides across sectors. First, there is the need, as we all know, for social responsibility, meaning the people on the ground, the communities, being able to understand and participate in the processes in conservation, and of course, also the utilization of the resource. Second, it needs to be balanced with the corporate interest, which is practically, we're talking about responsible practices without compromising the ecosystem, as well as ensuring that the future generation still benefits from the resources in the ecosystem. And lastly, there's still this public accountability, which is the role of the government in terms of enforcing their mandates and functions as mandated by law. And across all of this is the leadership function, I think, which Ramon Magsaysay is really looking into the transformative leadership side. And leadership resides in various levels and across sector. The challenge really here is in coming up with a win-win solution without compromising the principles as well as the stated mandates, as well as roles of the players or the stakeholders in the communities. So I think the leadership plays a very important role. May it be formal or informal leadership. This is about leading change, being able to bring together stakeholders towards a mutually beneficial solution in terms of doing the balancing of the conservation and utilization of the natural assets. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Slide. Please, yeah?
Just as one final thing to add, it's very much possible for businesses to transform. You as a business person have witnessed how making better choices in business is actually better for the company. There are so many businesses that are doing good practices. Taking, for example, the clothes I'm wearing is actually grown in ways that are restoring land, grown by women in the village and colored using natural dye. And this looks great, and also it protects the environment. And this is the kind of duality that is very much possible in today's world. And customers, clients, people, especially youth, more and more are making these choices. And I think it should be an inspiration for all of us in all walks of life. We need to better realize that we rely on healthy environment. None of us could live without clean air and water.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. And I am very happy. I am a member of the business community, as you all know, and I don't apologize for that. You know, not all of us are bad. Some of us are not just greedy capitalists. Some of us do care about society. And maybe the environment, even in communities, would be helped if there is a little bit more openness to the possibility that communities share interests and are able to work together. That there may be some interests who really have the common good at heart. And if that is the mindset, then it probably will be more possible to look for ways to work together, rather than always putting up all of your defenses. When a company comes and says, can we take a look at your and your property to see if there is room for a coffee bean plantation or a pineapple plantation. Of course, oil palm has a bad name, etc., or mining. But there are possibilities of doing commercial enterprises that hopefully will achieve both the interests of the community and the interests of the business entities that are interested. And that's really the point I wanted to make, that while there is this natural tension, my hope, and I think this is part of what we're trying to do in the Ramon Magsaysay Transformative Leadership Institute, is to bring people together to talk about these issues and to look for ways by which people can collaborate rather than just oppose each other all the time. So I wanted to make that point. Thank you. Thank you very much for that part of the conversation. I have one more set of questions I'd like to ask before I open the floor for questions. You have been waging your fight to preserve the environment in an environment where much of the whole world has come on board. Of course, you've had COP or COP, whatever. But we all know what has happened in the US, where the new president is somebody whose beliefs on the environment are not quite in sync with environmentalists. He is saying that he believes in drill, drill, drill. He believes in overturning many of the initiatives that have begun to gain traction. He is in fact thinking of again withdrawing from the Paris Agreement. In that environment, there are those who might tell you, fine, you guys are doing great work. But when you think about it, the developing world contributes so little to this global warming and this global damage to the environment. And if the big polluters of this world, like the US, for example, is not going to take this battle seriously, why are you continuing to do what you do? I know the answer, of course, but I'd like you to articulate it, because it is a challenge, and I think it's good for, I guess, people to understand that this is a fight that is worth pursuing in spite of the actions of some of our world leaders. So please, whoever feels like responding, please go ahead.
I wanted to take a story from a fable, an East African tale about a hummingbird. The story goes that once upon a time there was a huge forest fires, and all the animals panicked, running away from the fires. And in the middle of that smoke, on that heat, there's a little hummingbird that flew down to the river, take a drop of water, and flew back and dropped that drop of water on the fire. And then all the other animals asking, "What are you doing? You are just a hummingbird. A drop of water will not put out the fire." And the hummingbird said, "But I am doing everything that I can. I will not just sit in silence to witness the fires take over our homes." And that small action inspired every other animal to start running to the river to get some water, and together they put out the fires. Maybe each and every one of us is so small, but if we could be that little hummingbird, that would be enough.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I continue what I do because I recognize that I'm in fact part of the problem. In fact, the extraction or the extractive industry flourish because there is demand for extraction. Look at us in the Philippines. How many cars are there in the roads? So I think recognizing that we are part of this big problem will enable us to continue or drive to commit so that the same mistakes or the mistakes of the current generation will not happen or will not affect the future generation. That's it.
Thank you. And Yes.
I think a lot of people tend to forget that the need is very real to conserve. It's literally an existential crisis for the entire planet. We have the climate crisis here. We have a bigger crisis in the background. It's called the biodiversity crisis. And if we don't take action, we literally will lose this world. Our sons, our daughters, the places that we love, the places that inspire us to be who we are today will disappear. And that's worth fighting for. That's a life worth living for me. There couldn't be anything more meaningful than that. That's why I keep on doing what I do. It's also because I have seen a glimpse of it in certain places, both in Masungi and in other countries. It is possible. And if there's any main goal that we should be attempting to reach, it's how to live in balance with the life around that, with the ecosystems that we belong to. Yes, it is a continuing struggle, but there are opportunities associated with it. There are solutions that have already been shown. And it may seem daunting for us because honestly, all of this new research, all of this new technology that we have, a lot of it's very recent. But it's also very exciting because we are the generation that could actually make a difference for it, right? So that's what motivates me. It cannot also be discounted that the conservation ecosystem or the ecosystem for social good in general is just such a wonderful ecosystem to be a part of. Wiza and I may be working on the ground. There are people working their ass off at COP29, I'm sorry for the language, to battle, to defend, to anticipate what needs to be anticipated for the next coming years. And you might not see all levels of the fight, but there are wonderful people at all levels. And I guess that's my challenge, right? Find your place in that fight.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You know, this reminds me of the fact that many of us in countries like the Philippines and Indonesia and Thailand, we go through these political cycles and political processes. And sometimes we are very frustrated about the quality of our government, the quality of our leaders. And oftentimes our reaction is to blame the leaders. And in conversations, I guess, with friends or others who like to complain, I always like to make the point that, yes, okay, fine, maybe we could have better leaders, but maybe it really should all start with each of us doing what we can in our little spheres of influence, in our little areas, or even in the way we do our own work. Maybe that's where you can begin to make a difference. And I guess it's the same in this environmental crusade and all of these other crusades which you undertake. It does not need the leadership of the great large people of the large countries, but each one of us doing our part. So I guess that's the message that we are imparting here. Thank you very much. I understand there are questions from the floor. I would be happy to entertain them now. Please take this mic. Thank you very much. Introduce yourself, please.
So, hello, I'm Patrick Pablo from Gapan City College. So, here's my question for Ms. Farwiza. So, in your experience, what are the most effective strategies to engage private sector actors in large-scale environmental protection efforts, especially when their interests may conflict with conservation goals? Ulitin ko po, in your experience, what are the most effective strategies to engage private sector actors in large-scale environmental protection efforts, especially when their interests may conflict with conservation goals?
Thank you. Yeah, similar to the discussion we just had. What are some of the most effective methods of engaging the private sector so that there's more alignment between what you're trying to do and what the private sector is trying to achieve?
I think there are diverse tactics in engaging the private sector. It really depends on what they're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve. If they are a mining company that is seeking to dismantle protections of thousands of hectares of land to then mine it for gold or any other resources, and it will eventually have direct implications to the land and the pollutions and the resources in the area and the communities in the area, I don't think you could engage them in the same way if the company is an ecosystem restoration company or if it's a different businesses. So for us, if it's a company that straight away seeking to convert large scale of land into either monoculture plantations or mining, then the tactic is harsh. The tactic is initially dialogue, and maybe we find ways to dismantle the finance of the company. We would look at where do they get their money from, which bank do they borrow it from, and attack them, practically attack their permits, attack their, making life difficult for them. So then when we negotiate, we would be sitting on the stronger term. However, if from the get-go, the company come and sit down with us and say, hey, look, we got this permit of 60,000 hectares of land from the government, and some of those land are sensitive wildlife habitat. What should we do? Then the approach would be different. We wouldn't be attacking straight away. We would sit down with them and look at the maps. Where are the wildlife corridor? Where are the high conservation value and high carbon stocks area within their land? And maybe what they have is legal, and maybe we don't need to go into a fight if this is already a good intention that come from the companies. So I don't think we should sweep everybody in one basket and attack and go hard on everybody. I think finding that common ground is extremely crucial and important in moving forward.
Excellent point. Looking for the common ground. Next question, please, from the floor.
Hi, my name is Catherine and I'm from Gapan City College. And here is my question. How do you ensure that the conservation efforts you lead are sustainable in the long term beyond the initial empowerment phase?
Sustainability. How do you ensure sustainability beyond the initial burst of enthusiasm?
With great difficulty, to be honest. One, conservation efforts need to make sense. It needs to make sense, especially for the people who are doing it. Why does the community wants to conserve a certain block of land? Is it because we ask them to do it, or because they see the importance of protecting it? In many of our interaction with the communities, we take that collaboration because they wanted to protect the forest, and they just need support on finding out how they could protect the forest. And because of that initial push from that community, then the pathways is easier. Sometimes we support them with equipment, we support them with tools, we support them with knowledge, but we don't necessarily mean we paying the community to patrol the forest. It's their own desire because they think it's important. Now, when we look at landscape as big as the Loiser ecosystem, 2.6 million hectares, it's huge. You can't possibly think that you could conserve everything as untouched, pristine primary forest. There will be areas where communities interact with the forest, just as Ms. Rizwana have mentioned, that interaction between people and their environment develop that sense of ownership of wanting to protect that land. So that's essentially how we think it could be sustainable. However, much of these questions also remain yet to be answered.
Thank you. Anne or Sly, would you like to chime in at this point?
Yeah, we're not directly into conservation practically. Our work is looking at the intersection of the local ecosystems, resilience building for that, and that intersects with local economy, human development, infrastructure, among others. So practically our work is with the local government units and building on the existing mandates and the platforms at the local level to include the barangays. So our effort right now is really in bridging partnerships between the private sector and ensuring that the private is helping out the local government units. So in terms of ecological protection or conservation, these are work that are being done by our main partners at the barangay or the community level.
Thank you. Anne?
I guess it might be a little bit different for us because destination stewardship is at the heart of our model. And like what you said, some level of sustainability is needed to run the kinds of efforts that we run. We have about 100 rangers who are working on the land. And we find that empowering communities through enterprise development does enable them to run conservation projects of their own. And it's wonderful to see these kinds of projects where things are being done with conservation at the center. It's one thing to do it that way, right? And it's like in tourism. It's one way to pursue sustainable tourism, one thing to use it as a marketing tactic, another to be a company supporting restoration, and another, there are many ways to support our biodiversity financing gap in the Philippines is at 80%. It's huge. But it doesn't need to be money. It could be resources. It could be people's time. It could be people's expertise. There are many ways to fill that in. Many ways to look at it. Not to mention with a lot of climate investments coming out now, there's a lot of ways to reach out in the international space to get funding so that you can create economically feasible model. And last but not the least, though, this is not to discount the need of policy, right? It's very important to have an enabling government for you to push innovations, for you to push these new economic models on the ground. In other countries, they would have for area-based management initiatives like ours, incentives, tax breaks, and such. In the Philippines, we do not have that yet. Our protected area law is very young. You'd have an easier time entering the forest as an extractive group than as a group focused on ecosystem restoration. Then you will be attacked, right? But we are the Philippines. We are for the third year in a row, the country that is most at risk to the climate crisis. We need to act urgently now, and we need to empower groups who actually need to make a difference or to do things differently.
Thank you, Anne. If I may, we have hundreds of people listening in, so I would like to entertain at least one of the online questions. A lot of our listeners are young people, and they would like to know what is it that you have been able to do in Indonesia that has inspired more young people to get involved in environmental issues. Are there some specific NGO or non-NGO programs that you would like to share with us that might be considered here, that might be a way of mobilizing more young people into this environmental crusade?
There's a lot of things that, especially my colleague, who majority are very, very young, they're Generation Z, and they are full of ideas on what we can do to mobilize young people. We are doing music festivals, we're doing Loiser festivals, we have podcasts. We're also doing trainings for young environmental paralegals as a pathway to open them up to exposure on how, as newly fresh graduate from law schools, they could be more involved in environmental protections. We also engaging youth in many of our community organizing work, where they have the opportunity to come and stay with the community in the village, especially the communities not where they come from, and come to immerse themselves in the reality of what would it feels like to live on the edge of the forest, what would it feels like to live off the river and the land. And this type of experience allow exchanges from these very educated youth with the communities that they live with. And that allow for compassion and empathy to grow among both sides. So for us, the young people are the source of inspiration, the source of strength, and we're learning so much from them, but it's also, they give us all these challenges that we need to meet as we are facing the future that they will inherit.
Yes, very eloquently stated. Thank you. And anybody else? Do you see a role, Farwiza, what about in schools? Do you think there is much more that can be done while kids are still in school to develop this mindset that they have a responsibility to take care of the earth?
Absolutely. I think as we study in school and then we go into our specification when we grow up, we learn to be lawyers, we learn to be economists, we learn to be doctors. We somehow miss the fact that regardless of what we study and we understand, the environmental education become very important. In the past, in Indonesia, many of the judges, for example, that are ruling on environmental cases have no idea how ecological systems work. So they think if the forests disappear and get completely cut down and get burned down, you just need to grow it back. But you can't bring back species that have gone extinct. The ecosystem function will not be the same. And that gaps comes from the lapse of our understanding in school. So we are also working with schools and university to bring in environmental education as part of the curricula, because it is important that children, youth, and adults understand how their interaction with the ecosystem would have long-term consequences for the ecosystem and for themselves.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also agree that there is really a need for the youth to be involved or engaged, or if not, active leadership in all of these things. And important to that is by identifying various platforms, because we cannot do it piecemeal. You can always do poster making, paliga, So I think it's about really seeking out which platform works best based on the context. And one of that is the school-based youth intervention. But to balance and to make it more inclusive, there is this out-of-school youth that we call. So I think there should be a platform also for that. In the Philippines, there's the Sangguniang Kabataan, which is the duly mandated or elected youth representation. But beyond that, there are also non-government led young people's organizations. So I think what we need to do is to really seek out for these institutions, bring them together, and maybe come up with a common platform. We've started at NRC this Young Leaders for Resilience program, and practically it's about engaging the young people at the grassroots level, at the barangay, excuse me, and making them aware of their role in terms of understanding their risk and being accountable, owning their risk so that they are able to come up with good solutions towards that. Also, we have included it already in the Philippine Resilience Awards as one of the new sectors. We've started with the women category. So along those lines, we are looking at the young people as a good venue for really coming up with transformational change.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sly. I think for the young people who are here or listening in, I think what is appropriate would be to link up with, there are many groups that are involved in this kind of work. So look for the group that you find interesting, link up with them. Or if they do not exist, get together with some of your friends and get yourselves organized, because there is much more that can be done by people working together than trying to do things individually. So I think there's power in collaboration. So I would encourage those of you who are interested to pursue that path. Anne, did you want to add something?
Yeah, actually, so many things were entering my mind. Let me know if I'm talking too much. But identity of place. You know, Jose Rizal told us, I always love highlighting this. Jose Rizal told us a very popular line that makes so much sense, right? Kung hindi ka lumingon sa iyong pinanggalingan, hindi ka makakarating sa iyong paroroonan. And unfortunately, as far as the Philippine identity is concerned, I don't think we've looked back well enough. We've looked back as far as colonial culture goes. Somehow there's an understanding of pre-colonial culture, still not as much. But we also need to go back to the land that we exist in, the life that we share the land with. And when we're grounded to that extent, it's so much easier to understand what kind of action is required of us in the places and spaces we belong to. Sustainability is not a theory that you can implement and say that you're already moving towards a balanced planet. Ang daming concepts, plastic, pollution, waste management, so many you don't know how to prioritize. But if you ground yourself well enough, you know where to start and you will know where to go. And I think education is a big part of that, making sure that we are educated on the watersheds, the ecosystems that we belong to, something as basic as that. Done as early as people's formative years. I'm looking at Wiza and our experience and the experience of so many rangers in Masungi, and it's because from a very early age, they already had a relationship with the land. They know many things that at this point in time you can't learn in the classroom. It's a personal interaction with these spaces. And that's endangered because of just how detached we are from nature. Metro Manila in particular. We have a city, we don't even have green spaces. Even just to interact with the tree is so difficult for some of our youth. That is something worth reevaluating and I think would be very powerful to pursue. Better environment education. I have something else to add. On the other side of the spectrum, Masungi's way of educating people, the intent was, of course, to build that kind of a relationship replicated within a 4-hour hike inside Masungi. But the truth is, people do not come for the environment education. They come for the adventure. They come for the leisure, right? So we need to see how we can start with spaces where people already are and bridge in environment education. And there's so many ways to do it. It's a basic tenet of marketing. And marketing professionals will do
And
it.
linking kids in school to environmental issues right in the locality where they are is probably a powerful way of making it not only more interesting, but relevant to themselves and their lives, yeah.
Definitely, and it's not just communities, it's the businesses who exist in that locality
Sure.
who will gain more clarity.
Sure.
All other institutions that you find in it.
Farwiza was telling me last night that one of the projects she's considering is to set up an environmental school. Would you like to talk about that a little bit along the lines that we're talking about here?
Yeah, we had this idea that we conceived with, so more recently, we were working with Tengku Inong, which is the female religious leader in Aceh. One of these Tengku Inong ran a character school. So the school was not based on a curriculum that the children that started at kindergarten was not promised that they would graduate and be able to read and write, but that they would have a discipline, they would have compassion, they would have empathy, they would have a strong character to be a good human being. So her school have run all the way to junior high school, and she would like to collaborate to start a senior high school with us. And we have been toying with the idea, why don't we have a conservation school in the Loiser ecosystem? So this is a conversation currently ongoing. We are not set yet on how it's gonna look like, but we are hoping to create a space where youth, children, and even adults could learn and study nature and have that wisdom and exchange that with one another. We somehow have lost our connection not only to nature, but also to our elders. People who know and understand how nature works. We want to appreciate that. We want to create a space for that. So that's an invitation if you want to join in.
Sounds like a wonderful idea. Let's talk about it some more. Let's come back now to our audience here, please. Yes, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Chelsea Luis Sanuan. I'm from the Lyceum of the Philippines University, College of International Relations. So my question is, what are the most effective and sustainable strategy for empowering women, youth, in leading conservation efforts, and how we can overcome the challenges they face in leadership roles? Because you have said that everyone has a voice, but not everyone hears it. So I have an additional question. How can international diplomacy and relations support these initiatives, ensuring they provide sustainable economic opportunities and fostering global cooperations?
Wow. Okay. Who would like to handle that? Farwiza is passing it on to Anne or to Sly.
Loaded. Well, I guess I'll start with the last question. The fact that we are in this world that's more interconnected than ever presents us with a lot of opportunities that we could use to help the Philippines. Like I said, there are so many investments that are available and so many people who are willing to bring investments to the Philippines. there are so many groups capitalizing on that, but it's another to allow already established organizations to come in and to have grassroots organizations empowered, something that young people of today could lead and begin, right? The talk is always, how do you make sure that the most vulnerable of our population benefits? Well, I'm telling you, there's not enough projects allowing for that to happen. And we need more transparency on how these things are spent, more projects, credible projects where these things could be funneled into, right? So there's that. The other aspect is, in a country like the Philippines that may have a challenging political landscape, it may be difficult to simply limit your campaign efforts to the Philippines. But if you reach outside, engage internationally, understand the world structures that could potentially impact the Philippines and leadership in the Philippines, then there's a lot of political influence that could also be shaped from there. From investments to divestments, to other sources of power and resources. What was the first question?
It is, what are the most effective and sustainable strategy for empowering women and youth in leading conversation efforts, and how we can overcome the challenges they face in leadership roles? Because as the speaker said, that everyone has a voice, but not everyone listens to it.
Do you want to save me now?
What we want to get to by empowering women is essentially create an inclusive society. When you think about inclusion, it's not enough to just invite someone into the room. You need to give them the microphone, and you need to listen, and you need to allow their perspective to influence the entire conversation. That's not easy. Sometimes you invite someone, you give them the microphone, they don't necessarily decide to speak, because for years, for generations maybe, they have been taught not to speak. So they kept quiet even when the opportunity emerged. You need to be persistent and allowing that to happen over and over and over again until they find it within themselves to claim that stake at the table. That's my first opinion. And on top of that, how to support women in leadership position, you make sure that everyone around her also have that honest conversation with her. I could be in the position that I am now, leading the organizations that I do. It is also because the men around me has been incredibly supportive. You see right here, my husband and my father. It's those feminist men that enable the woman in their life to thrive. And we need more men like that. My co-founder is also a man who would be very frank, very honest, and sometimes very harsh with me, brutally honest. But at the same time, when we are facing the entire organization, he would stand by my side, supporting everything I say. But once we are in the private space, he would criticize me if you don't agree with me. Then he would not banish me publicly, knowing the impact of that, what it would do to my reputation and what it would do to the respect of the team towards me. Acknowledging that the world are not equal, but we need to do everything that we can to make sure those who are marginalized, those who are on the fringe, those whose voice are not listened to, are given enough platform to be listened to and to have their voice amplified.
Thank you.
Thank you so
very
much.
Thank you. With the indulgence of the panel, I see four in the queue to ask questions here. I will entertain them now. Please, go ahead. Thank you very much.
Hello po. Hello.
Yes.
I am Ryan Binoya from Gapan City College. My question is for Farwiza. The question is, as an empowered woman on your society, what is your advice to the youth and also to the society to become a protector in our environment?
To become a
to become a protector on our environment.
Protector. What's your advice to people who want to be protectors of the environment?
I wanted to say just do it, but it kind of sounds like an ad. But, you know, in truth, my journey to start working in conservation was not easy. It was not straightforward. It went through many twists and turns. But if you're persistent, you will get there eventually, hopefully, in the end. But more than anything, it's extremely valuable to build a network of supporters around you, to find your people, to find those who share the same goals with you, and to find strength in each other and to go forward together, to find that partnership. Like for me, I find multiple partnerships throughout my life as in forest conservation, to build organizations, to build a team, to brainstorm on ideas, and to move forward. Because at the end of the day, we are a sum of our environment. There's no such things as a self-made person. Each and every one of us depends on who we surround ourselves with. So if you want to do something for the protection of the environment, find your people. You'll find your way.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next.
Hi, good day. I am Naomi, a diplomacy student from LPU Manila. So my question is for Ms. Farwiza. So as a powerful speaker, how would you explain and promote environmental sustainability to a 5-year-old child who dreams to be like you one day and follow your legacy?
A powerful speaker, you said. You have no idea how nervous I was. I was actually very scared to come on stage. I wear baggy pants because my knees were shaking. So for a 5-year-old child who wanted to be like me, they could totally be. If at 5 years old they thought they wanted to protect the environment, they are already so much more advanced than I am.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Next.
Hello, I am Jam Iris Baglikawan from Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Maynila po. So, in the international socio-political context, forests, especially in rural areas, are being used or rather known as to be a retreating place of terror and violence instigators. So, how can we properly discern po the difference between environmental activism and forest management to political propagandas to further avoid nuances of red tagging? Thank you po.
Did you get the question?
Yes, I did get the question, but I think the case was slightly different between Indonesia and the Philippines when it comes to violence around forests. Just a brief insight from my own experience. In many cases, forest conservation did start with militarization and with violence and pushing people out of their land. And that is something that needs to change. We need to decolonize conservation. And we also need to give back that fact that the best protector of forests, the best manager of biodiversity has been people who live on the land, those indigenous community, and that needs to be acknowledged. I can't necessarily say that every conservation initiative has been good and pure and not harmful to communities, because in reality there are conservation initiatives that have been harmful to communities, and there are violence against local communities on behalf of conservation, and that require a systematic, honest conversation to dismantle those violence. But I was in conversation with Anne Masungi about this.
Well, maybe a few additional insights. A lot of the discontent coming in remote places would actually come from their dispossession, as what you mentioned, being driven out of your land, not being supported, and knowing how illegal it is, and yet it persists and happens. It doesn't happen because they want to overturn the government. That's not what a lot of people want, right? It's simply for the law to be followed and to stay safe in the places that they call home. So if we want to solve the problems around the government problem around communism or whatsoever else, it's worth really looking at the issues that you find on the ground. For environment conservation, I understand why there might be some ideological issues that people might perceive as there, simply because we're talking about the right of ecosystems and everyone for a healthy ecology. But that's very far from communism, right? It's not the same notion. Definitely not. So the question is, how do you make sure that it doesn't? It could be very difficult because red tagging in the Philippines has sometimes been used as a blanket for any kind of opposition, right? So it could make it very difficult to do environment protection work. So the reality of the Philippines, in fact, is that we're the deadliest place in Asia for environment defenders for 11 years now. It's not a very short amount of time, right? And we still in Masungi face a lot of harassment, but it helps that we have visibility. It's part of strategy that we build our profile. It helps that we have very deliberate documentation happening on the ground to debunk any form of disinformation. And a very active attempt to engage the youth and make use of social media to get people to respond to the incidents that happen on the field at the right time. That's all supported as well by having champions in spaces that matter. Like what Wiza said, it's not something that you work on your own. There are more than 200 partners enabling Masungi in the background. We have expertise-based volunteers helping us out with the work that you do. And when you have that network, champions in the right places, then it's also easier to navigate politics even in very difficult circumstances. I'm not going to say it's easy, it's still not, but yes, you live. And compared to environment defenders that I know who, in the Philippines, you can get as much as 53 cyber libel cases, all with the same content. That's how much of an harassment our environment defenders face. In Masungi, we have about 11 coming from last year, in addition to the ones in the prior years. But it does decrease it. It doesn't remove it entirely, but it does decrease it. And it helps that we actually have legal firms, pro bono or low bono, helping us out. So that's where the expertise-based support comes in. I hope that gives a picture of what works and what doesn't. Last, because I feel like it's important for environment defenders, language also matters, to be honest. It matters in tourism, it matters in hospitality, it also matters in advocacy. Sometimes the understanding around red tagging stems from simply using simple words that people associate with red tagging. There are other ways to frame and package things so that we avoid those kinds of notions.
That's a real challenge in the Philippines, is it not? Unfortunately, we have a record for environmentalists meeting very tragic endings too often, much too often. There's one more question online, which goes back to that question of how do you deal with powerful interests who want to bring development to your area in the form of oil palm plantations, for example. And what about the sympathies of the local people who want these enterprises to come in because to them it means jobs and livelihood? The question really is how do you deal with that? How do you convince the people that what you are continuing to do in your crusade is a more meaningful thing for them to support rather than the immediate benefits that would come from economic development in the area in the form of oil palm plantations, for example?
Dr. Karma tell me something that meant so much today. He said that in the big wild world of the universe, in the spans of time, we are so tiny. We're just a speck of dust. That same goes to those very powerful interests. It really comes down to engaging with them in ways that could work. So, for example, a whole lot of the communities that have experienced having their land taken away by palm oil interests are a lot more proactive in trying to restore those lands because they know their livelihood really depends on them owning the land, not working for those companies. Because working for those companies, they're making less than minimum wage. Owning those lands and having the resources, the protein directly from nature, they actually gain better livelihood. Sometimes when they're involved in restoration initiatives through agroforestry, they actually bring them more prosperities than working in mining concessions. However, there are realities that there's existing large-scale exploitative activities in the area. What do we do with them? We sometimes work with the government to run evaluation on is all of these companies paying tax? Are they paying their share to the government? Are they operating within their concessions or they went outside and beyond? Are they complying to the environmental regulations? Sometimes it's a realization that we don't necessarily making everybody our enemies. Some of those corporations are looking for ways to transform their operations, to become more sustainable, to be more compliant, and we are willing to work with them if that is the case. And with the communities as well, we don't necessarily, now we realize, have a rose-tinted glasses that everything that communities is doing will be good. As Ms. Rizwana have shown, sometimes there are divisions in that communities and that create a horizontal conflict. But then time and time again, it comes back to finding common ground. What do we want to find together? What are we trying to achieve together? Because at the end of the day, I don't think anyone really come with the intention, oh, I'm going to come in and destroy the forest. Destroying the forest is simply a byproduct of the activities that they choose to do. And if we could find a way to restore this forest, then we would be willing to work together.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that's been a very engaging discussion. Rather than me trying to summarize everything, I think it will be probably more productive to ask the members of our panel to give closing statements, and then we will end it with that. So why don't we start with Sly, and then Anne, and then Wiza, okay? Gentlemen first.
Yeah, thank you very much. My closing statement will be in honor of our Magsaysay awardee. I believe for a fact, and the other awardees here, I believe for a fact that what they did from the very beginning was not to really get recognition or award. I'm sure they didn't know that they're going to win the Ramon Magsaysay Award. And I think the fuel for that is passion and commitment and the selfless interest. Being able to contribute to the community where you grew in, opening your eyes and understanding, and opening also your ear in terms of listening, not only with the fellow people in the community, but also other stakeholders, to include government, the big businesses, and other interest groups. And I think one of the notable things that stood out is really on the leadership part, the transformative leadership part, in being able to lead change, lead transition, and ensure that real transformation happens not only for themselves, but also for the people that they are with. And I think lastly, all of these people did what they did out of love. Love for their community and love for the society that they belong. That would be all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sly. Round of applause for Sly. Anne, please.
I've mentioned this before, but I'll say it again. I'm so happy that Wiza is here to represent the environment sector because her experience mirrors the experiences of so many of us who can't even have the opportunity to stand before you to tell their stories and the things that they want to happen. So please do what you can, take the first step, whatever step that may be, and try to look as deep as you can. It may come off as challenging. At some points, it may seem scary, but sometimes those are the points in time when if you just take things one step further, things may happen, things may change, right? So don't be scared, carry on with it, have the resilience, have the spunk to do it, the way Wiza has been dealing with the campaigns that she has been running. And let's continue on together. There's a big force for group among youth, among women, among businesses. Businesses, I'm not even kidding, there are serious climate leaders among businesses right now. And we just all need to come together to create just a new model where we could achieve this balance that we're looking for. So Wiza, thank you for being a balm to the soul of so many, for being a testament of resilience, for showing us that things could seem daunting and challenging, but it can be done. And even if it takes 10 years, it will be worth it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anne. Your passion is not only evident, but it's highly contagious. We'll end with Farwiza, please.
I just want to extend an invitation. I wanted to extend an invitation to every man in this room to be a feminist man, to support the woman in your life, be it your sister, your girlfriend, your wife, your mother. And I want to invite every woman to also find that strength within you to do what you feel is right, to follow that heart calling, to not give up no matter what society tells you. And there's so many youth in this room. And I remember being 20, being 17, being 19, being lost in the world, wanting to do things but not knowing how. Don't be scared. Just move forward and be persistent. Be very, very persistent. Because if you're persistent, you'll get there, really. I see so many around me that have managed to do the impossible just because they are so stubborn. And stubbornness is a quality. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a very engaging discussion. Thank you all so much. Again, I'm Ramon del Rosario. It's been a great pleasure to be your moderator this afternoon. Thank you for the privilege. I would now like to call on our Vice Chair, Susan Siskel, to formally close this afternoon's event.
Thank you, Ramon. Well, we're coming to the end of this incredible day. I just first want to thank all of you and really extend my deep gratitude for your spending so much time with us, coming so far, paying great attention, being deeply engaged in this session and others. I think it's heartening for Ramon and me and our fellow trustees and our Magsaysay staff to see how many of you are here listening and really being moved, I think, by the speakers we've heard. As the next generation of people who are going to affect the world, I hope that this institute is inspiring to you and you'll continue to come back and that you will try and learn more about all of our honorees that we've had. As we heard today, cultural vitality and preservation and environmental conservation are among the most important and critical challenges we face. Your willingness to learn more and to get engaged gives, I think, all of us great hope and real joy for the future. Perhaps all of you are hummingbirds, or maybe you'll become hummingbirds and join together in dealing with these problems that we face. Farwiza, I have a personal interest in Farwiza's award because I helped to create the Emerging Leader Award many years ago when we thought we need to have younger people who are doing great work to inspire people like you. So it's a special pleasure for me to thank Farwiza for what she has done and how she will continue to inspire people. Her selfless integrity, service, and transformative leadership embody the greatness of spirit that we find in all of our Ramon Magsaysay awardees over the last 66 years. Farwiza and her fellow awardees, Dr. Karma, and I don't know if anyone else is here, but Dr. Fung from Vietnam, Miyazaki Hayao from Japan, and the Rural Doctors Movement from Thailand are all shining examples of passion and persistence that can create real and lasting change in the world and be great inspirations for all of us. As we come to the close of this incredible day, I hope that we'll all be able to share stories that we've heard, think about the meaningful exchanges we've had on stage, and share with your family and your friends, people in your circles. Share on social media, which I'm sure some of you are already doing. You know, we all think, we at the Magsaysay Foundation believe that greatness of spirit is innate in all of us, and it can be awakened by inspiration and nourished by connections, even new connections that we made today. I hope that this lecture series and the wonderful stories that we've heard from our awardees can spark action among all of you and the people you touch, and hopefully inspire new generations of compelling stories for the future. I want to thank you all for being here. Thanks to our awardees and our panelists. We're very grateful for all of you. Have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye. I think it's photos now.
I love your hummingbird story.
May we request the following to join our moderator and panelists on stage for a photo. Ms. Suzanne Siskel, Vice Chairman of the Board of Trustees of the Ramon Magsaysay Award Foundations, and Ms. Joy Alampay, Director of the Ramon Magsaysay Transformative and Leadership Institute. I now invite those who are on stage to come down to the audience to have a group picture. Can you please stand, audience? Please stand. Jump. Tapos na ba? Thank you once again for joining us in the RMTLI lecture series this afternoon with Farwiza Farhan, 2024 Ramon Magsaysay Awardee from Indonesia. We would like to acknowledge our partners for today's event. This event is supported by SGV and Company and Animation Council of the Philippines Incorporated. Special thanks to Pioneer Life Incorporated. We would also like to acknowledge our co-conveners: ASEAN Youth Advocates Network, Asia Society Philippines, Center for Filipino Youth Volunteers SINAG, Far Eastern University International Studies Society, GoodGov PH, FINMA Education, Student Council Alliance of the Philippines, University of the Philippines Diliman Information Office, UP Asian Center, and Zwelig Family Foundation. We would love to see you share your time with us here during the lectures. Please tag us on social media at Magsaysay Award with the hashtag Ramon Magsaysay Award and hashtag RMTLI Lecture Series. Please let us know what you think about this lecture by filling in the feedback form when you scan the QR code on the screen. We will provide certificates of completion for those who answer the feedback form. The RMTLI lecture series is just the first of the events for the 66th Ramon Magsaysay Awards Festival Week. We would also like to invite everyone to the 66th Ramon Magsaysay Awards presentation ceremonies on November 16, Saturday at 4 p.m. We would also like to thank the official media partners of the 66th Ramon Magsaysay Awards Festival season: NHK World Japan, Associated Press, and Mongabay Indonesia. To keep updated on our latest activities, visit our website at rmaward.asia or follow us on social media at Magsaysay Award. Please exit the venue in a swift and orderly fashion. Photographs can be taken in the plaza area. Your snacks can be claimed at the food table located outside the hall. Thank you and have a good day.